So I feel pretty confident of how this show might wrap up in the next 3 episodes. I think at this point, I think the big death is going to be Majima, not necessarily Chisato or Takina, mainly because I think it's been, based on my own comment section, based on what I was seeing discussion-wise, what I said in my previous video, the idea of there being another heart for Chisato, it's very likely. If they developed a heart that could last a dozen years, I mean, a dozen years later, you're going to have technology that's way better than the one you gave her. So it's entirely possible she could get another heart that would let her live a normal human life. And if she does end up helping the DA, and the DA is connected as much as we think with the Institute, it's entirely likely she'll be rewarded with said heart. So for me, I think the big death will be Majima, but I think his death is going to start a change unlike anything that this world has experienced ever since the last documented terrorism attack. Yes, the idea of giving civilians across the goddamn country guns, and as we saw with the shots fired in the blood, innocent people are dying. I'm not saying Majima doesn't deserve to be punished, but it's hard for me not to have a part of me saying, tear it all down, goddammit, because this DA, even if there's good apples, I think the higher-ups, both in the Institute and both in the DA, I think are corrupt as shit. I don't like the idea of peace as an illusion. I think if you walk down the street, you should know of the crimes that have happened in your neighborhood so that you don't fall victim and get blamed for your death as, well, it was a freak accident. No, it was people with guns literally tried to kill people, right? So I think for him, it's almost like this Hail Mary. This is like his final hurrah. I don't think Majima probably believes he's going to get out of this one alive. I mean, he's probably going to aim to get out alive, but I think realistically, given this man, as crazy and Joker-like as he appears to be at times, I think he's rational in the way of knowing what will be his final hurrah, and this feels like it. So, for me, if this action, because how do you cover it up? You can't say, oh, it was a subway train that exploded because cables crossed and obviously that's why the big explosion happened. A bunch of guns being discovered in supposedly the most peaceful place in the world. As everyone else deals with wars and crimes, you get to walk down the street knowing nothing happens. It does happen. It's been covered up. And the fact that it's going to be impossible to cover that up unless they kill every single person with said gun, I mean, even though they try calling it off, I mean, it's going to be too late, right? So for me, it's a conflicting feeling because innocent people shouldn't have to die for this to be tore down. But it seems impossible to ever get back to a normal sense of reality without some blood being shed. And while if this was the real world, I'd have a completely different tune, this being a story that, yes, can make me feel conflicted, it's hard not to say, Majima, before you get shot in the head, man, tear this goddamn DA down, expose the truth. I mean, this feels like it can't go back to the way it was. Takina and Chisato surviving, I think, could be a very likely scenario, just given with progression of technology and everything, but Majima seems like he'll be the big death, and if that's true, his death is going to serve such a snowball effect of his death with what he caused with this terrorism act. There's no way the DA gets to go back to who they were, and it's entirely possible the DA being exposed of what they were doing this whole time, they might end up in jail. They might be completely destroyed and not be able to work as they did before. And that probably would be the best solution entirely, or at the very least, do it in a way that feels lawful, not going under the law. There's a moment with Majima when basically they charge in thinking they captured him, but he's just on the screen. He talks about what good and evil are, and basically it's defined as what the laws are. So the fact that they're going under the law, how can you really say you're the good in this world when you're doing basically the same shit I am, just going at it in a different way? I'm not saying Majima's a good guy, or that he, hasn't made some very bad mistakes and have cost innocent people their lives. He has, and he should be punished. But I can't deny the fact that I'm more rooting for him to tear down the DA than I am for the DA to capture and kill him, and they get to go back to just living in the shadows. To me, it doesn't sit right. I was a little iffy at it at the beginning of the show, but it kind of made sense. They had this piece, seeing what we've seen now. Honestly, at this point, tear it all down is what I'm saying. People might have different opinions, and that's perfectly fine, but man, honestly, I'm here for the chaos, and the chaos is what I'm expecting at this point. The most noticeable part of the episode prior to that is definitely the whole just kind of shutting down the cafe. Yes, we get to see all the customers basically indicate, there's no way you can close down, we need you, right? But to see them all kind of go their own ways, it's a very depressing scene without being like tearjerker worthy. It's just more of those like somber moments of knowing the end has come and there's no way we can continue as we have. And to see the moments, just the one-on-one with Teach and Chisato, I mean, I'm glad that he wasn't a gun, it was a kimono, just almost like this celebration of, you know, you reached this point and, you know, you got to choose and live your life. But the fact that he exposed the truth of what happened with this man, you know, the fact of her two dads, right? Like, what truly is him? What is he truly like? And he had to break the realization that, one, you know, initially I was just doing this to further my own life. Obviously, I grew to love you, but it doesn't change the fact of what I started out. You were supposed to be this tool. Was it better for me to tell you before? And I'm glad that it wasn't hostile, because I think given what we've seen of Chisato's personality and what we've seen of how she feels, yes, it's a pretty shattering realization, one that she probably believes what he's saying, but wants to hear it from this man's mouth first and foremost. But the fact that she just said, I'm glad that you didn't, because otherwise I would have blamed you both, and obviously she would have ended down a more bloodshed-driven path. Instead, she got to work at a cafe, got to meet these friends and loved ones that she's never going to forget about until she dies. And because of that, it's not an act of betrayal because you didn't tell me. I got to truly craft my own life. Yes, we're in a shitty situation right now, but I mean, she lived longer than she would have had she never met them to begin with, right? Like, I think when you really look at the character writing in terms of where characters started to where they're currently at, it hasn't been like a massive jump in terms of their personality changing or their mindsets changing. But I think when you look at the dynamic between Teach here as well as Chisato, it's night and day in a very subtle way. You know, they were always bubbly. They always felt like they were two peas in a pod, right? They were disconnected. And a moment like this would normally shatter most people, and while it definitely stings her, and you can tell it stings her, there's a lot of great directing on the visual side. Hell, even how her vocals change ever so slightly, it gets across just, it's a painful realization, but it's hard for a character like her to say, well, had you told me this sooner, I wouldn't have felt like you lied to me all these years. Well, yes, it's a lie. She got to live a life that she's proud of, and yes, she wants to hear it from this man's mouth to begin with, because, you know, it's hard growing up with a certain image in mind that this is your savior. And it's not like she thinks Teach is lying, but more so, how can this be true? Like, I need to hear it from him first and foremost before deciding what happens next. Potentially, it won't even be like the DA who gives her a new heart. It could be her other father. It could just be that because she does something in a way that maybe he passes the briefcase over and that's how she'll be saved. It's entirely possible we'll go that route where a couple of characters, not our central characters, but maybe second father, the terrorist trying to tear down the DA, maybe those will be the big deaths, with other moments being kind of tugging on our heartstrings in emotional ways. Either way, with 3 episodes to go, Recoil has blown me away. It's an original that I didn't think would be this good, and the fact that A1 is hitting it out of the park with both of their originals airing on the same damn day, watching them back to back, it's good to see what A1 Pictures is doing these days, and feeling like they've really evolved from just being a studio that adapts a popular show and then just has a bunch of random stuff you can forget about. It kind of feels like with where they're at right now, I'm actually more interested in watching their series than a lot of other studios right now, which I never would have said rewinding 4 or 5 years back. But great episode, emotional in its own way, and it definitely sets up an intriguing end point for sure. But thoughts, feelings, and theories, if you got any down below, leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you're new around here. Until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.